What happens when philosophy meets palace politics and gets stabbed in the back? Before we dive into corruption, backstabbing, and the glorious implosion of an empire, let's meet the two main players in this royal mess. First up, Confucius, aka Confucius. He's famous for shaping the moral foundation of China for over 2,000 years, not with armies, but with ideas. One of his most famous quotes: "The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones." His big belief was that morality, not fear or money, should hold an empire together. He wasn't a king or a warrior. He was a renowned philosopher, teacher, and political thinker from around 500 BC. That society could run smoothly if everyone followed clear moral rules. Respect your parents, be loyal to your ruler, lead with kindness, know your place. Basically, behave yourself, play your role, don't be a jerk. Confucius believed good government came from virtue, not power, not fear, not bribes, just moral leadership and proper conduct. It was a nice idea. Too bad it got absolutely steamrolled. Because while Confucius was out here scribbling wisdom and dreaming of a perfect, peaceful society, the real empire was being run by a completely different crew: eunuchs. Now, in case you missed that day in history class, eunuchs were men who'd been castrated. Yes, that kind of castrated, and trained to serve inside the imperial palace. They couldn't start families, so emperors saw them as safe servants. No dynasties, no hidden heirs, just pure loyalty to the throne. In reality, they became the most powerful political force in the Han Dynasty. Let's set the stage. It's the Western Han, around the 2nd century BC. China is booming. The empire is huge, rich, and full of palace intrigue. And Confucianism is on the rise. Emperors are plastering it across state exams, schools, and temples. It's the official ideology. But like most official things in politics, that didn't mean it was actually in charge. Because while Confucian scholars were busy preaching about ethics and moral order, the eunuchs were building something much more useful: a loyalty-based, favor-trading, whisper-fueled shadow government, run entirely from inside the palace. Take Emperor Huan, for example. He took the throne in 146 BC, grew up reciting Confucian classics, learned all the right ideals. But once he was in power, he ditched the scholars and cozied up to the eunuchs. His favorite? A man named Zhang Rong, who quickly became the emperor's right-hand everything. Zhang Rong controlled appointments, money, court access, even who got to breathe near the throne. You want a promotion? Bribe Zhang Rang. Want your rival exiled? Zhang Rang's got a scroll for that. And the Confucian scholars? They were horrified. This violates the sacred moral code. It's unethical. Zhang Rang didn't care. The emperor didn't care. And the empire didn't exactly collapse. At least, not right away. But the Confucian crowd didn't back down. They fought the only way they knew how, with petitions. That's right. While the eunuchs built palaces and pocketed bribes, the moralists were writing very stern letters. They begged the emperor to clean up the court, ban the eunuchs, restore virtue, bring back good governance. And the emperor's response? Thanks for your concern. Shred. It got so bad it triggered a full-blown purge. Translation? The eunuchs used their power to silence every scholar who spoke out. Some were arrested, some were exiled, some were imprisoned, some just disappeared. Because when you challenge the palace's favorite power brokers, you don't get a debate, you get a death sentence. By now, the eunuchs weren't just influential, they were the government. They picked who got promoted, controlled access to the emperor, even manipulated the line of succession. Meanwhile, the Confucian loyalists were still out here quoting "the way of the gentleman," while bleeding out in prison cells. Confucius must have been rolling in his grave. His whole philosophy was supposed to guide the empire. Instead, it was background noise to a high-stakes game of bribes, plots, and whispered threats. Now, let's talk about the emperor who let this whole circus explode into a full-on disaster. Emperor Ling of Han, crowned in 168 BC, educated in the classics, expected to be wise, just, and moral. So, of course, he handed the keys to the eunuchs. He let them sell government jobs like raffle tickets. You want to be a governor? That'll be 10 million coins. General of the army? Hope you've got gold. It was open season on power, and the eunuchs were running the market. Zhang Rang and his crew got so rich, they built palatial estates inside the actual imperial compound. Zhang Rang even called himself the father of the emperor. Let that sink in. A eunuch, no kids, calling himself dad. And outside the palace gates? Confucian scholars were still begging for a return to moral governance. But what happens when the moralists finally snap? What happens when they stop writing scrolls and start sharpening knives? Liking this drama so far? Hit that subscribe button. More betrayals and assassinations coming right up. By the late 100s BC, Confucian scholars were barely hanging on. Their dream? A government led by virtue, guided by ethics, and held together by moral behavior. The reality? Bribes, assassinations, and eunuchs running the empire like a VIP club. The final straw? The Yellow Turban Rebellion in 184 BC? Yep, it's always the peasants. Millions of starving farmers revolted, led by a Taoist cult that promised magical healing, divine justice, and a better world. Spoiler, they didn't mention the Civil War part. While the countryside burned and rebels took cities, the court panicked. But could the eunuchs fix it? Of course not. While everything crumbled, eunuchs were too busy building koi ponds and pocketing gold. Zhang Rang and his gang were living in marble mansions inside the palace, while the empire collapsed outside. Confucian officials tried to intervene again, this time with urgency. But the scrolls didn't work. Petitions were ignored, and many of them were silenced permanently. So the army stepped in. Specifically, General He Jin, brother of the empress and one of the few people who still believed in old-school governance. He Jin hated the eunuchs. He blamed them for everything: the corruption, the rebellion, the decay. His plan? Get the emperor to issue a clean sweep, purge the palace, wipe out the eunuch class entirely. But before he could move, the eunuchs struck first. They lured him into the palace and assassinated him. Yep, the commander-in-chief, stabbed to death in the emperor's courtyard. Smooth. What followed was a massacre. Loyalist troops stormed the palace and started slaughtering eunuchs. It wasn't justice, it was revenge. Zhang Rang ended up drowning himself rather than face capture. Others were stabbed, hunted, or tried to escape in disguise. For a brief moment, it looked like the Confucians had finally won. But here's the twist. They didn't know what to do with power. Without the eunuchs holding the machinery of the court together, the empire collapsed into power struggles. Warlords rose, chaos returned, and the Confucian dream? Still just a dream. Their teachings lasted. Their influence on culture and education endured for centuries. But when it came to real politics, not scrolls, not school lessons, but actual power, Confucius lost. The eunuchs won. His teachings looked great on paper, carved into stone and quoted in imperial exams. But inside the palace walls, it wasn't virtue that decided who ruled. It was whoever controlled the emperor, the money, and the knives. Despite all the corruption, bribes, and power games, the eunuchs were the ones actually keeping the empire running. And once the eunuchs were gone, nothing got better. It just got bloodier. The names changed. The chaos didn't. History didn't learn from Confucius. It just hit repeat. Drop a comment and tell us what you think. Confucius or the eunuchs? Who had the real power? Let's play a game. Spot the AI fails in this video. Bet you missed a few.